Today, we are diving into a really fascinating and, I'll admit, pretty dense piece of esoteric work called The Rainbow Bridge. It was written by two authors who just called themselves two disciples. And what they created is basically a step-by-step guide, a how-to manual for connecting your everyday personality with your higher self, your soul. So let's jump right into the big idea at the heart of it all. The entire book, every single chapter, really boils down to this one powerful question. What if it was possible to consciously build a pathway, not out of wood or steel, but out of pure consciousness, that connects you, your everyday self, directly to your soul? So, to make sure we're all on the same page, the authors start by defining what they mean by the path. And it's not some physical journey you take. They say it's an evolutionary approach, a fundamental shift in your consciousness. It's not about going somewhere else. It's about becoming something more. Right here, right now. And that brings us to the first part of this whole journey, the deep, fundamental quest to make that higher connection, and more importantly, the specific tool the book says you need to actually pull it off. This bridge has a name, and it's a big one, the Antahkarana. It's described as this symbolic bridge you build entirely inside your own mind, inside your own consciousness. The whole point of it is to open up a direct line of communication to your higher self, with the ultimate goal being to actually fuse with it. The authors aren't just philosophizing here. They present this book as a literal instruction manual for building your own. But you gotta ask, why do we even need to build a bridge in the first place? Shouldn't that connection already be there? Well, according to the book, it's because that natural connection has gotten blocked. We are, in a very real sense, trapped inside invisible cages that we ourselves have built. The authors use this incredible phrase, fogs and miasmas. The idea is that our personal energy fields are just clouded over with all this psychic junk we've accumulated over, well, countless experiences. And this fog is what's obscuring our own inner light, blocking our connection to the soul. And if you could push past that fog, you'd find something more solid. They call it the cage. Now, obviously, it's not a literal cage. It's a metaphor for a deep framework of old, limiting patterns that keep our consciousness stuck, just repeating the same old loops over and over again. So, what's this cage actually made of? The book calls the building blocks thoughtforms. These are described as these old, accumulated patterns of energy from our past experiences, and maybe even past lives, that actively hold us back. You can almost think of them as the esoteric version of what psychology might call limiting beliefs or trauma responses. It's basically undesirable psychic residue. And what's really wild is how specific they get. The book lays out a whole map of the body, arguing that different kinds of these limiting thought forms tend to build up in very specific zones. You've got false ideas in the head, issues with self-worth in the chest and shoulders, all the way down to patterns in the feet that literally stop you from moving forward. The idea is that our spiritual blockages have a real physical correspondence. Okay, so that's the problem. We're foggy, we're in a cage. So how do we get out? This brings us to phase one of the work, the actual, practical, hands-on techniques for building that bridge to the soul. The core technique here is a meditation called triangulation. It's pretty cool. You start by invoking what's called a soul star, a point of brilliant light just above your head. Then you mentally move this light in a series of triangles, clearing a path all the way down through your body, forming this central vertical channel. And the final step, you anchor that channel deep into the earth, creating this beautiful connection between spirit and matter. But here's the key. None of this works without the ignition switch, and this soul mantram is presented as the absolute starting point for every single technique. It's not just a nice affirmation. The book says this is the actual command that turns on the soul's power, giving it the juice it needs to do the heavy lifting of building that channel. So once the bridge is built, you're not done, not even close. Now we move on to phase two, which the book frames as an active battle. It's about using this new channel you've built to systematically take apart that cage of thought forms piece by piece. Now, this slide points out a really critical distinction. On one hand, you have horizontal stimulation. That's just everyday life. People, events, situations that trigger our old patterns and basically feed them more energy. But the book's method is vertical stimulation. That's where you intentionally call down energy from the soul, and this higher frequency energy doesn't feed the thought forms, it completely disintegrates them. So what does this battle actually look like? Well, step one is activation. Using specific words of power, the disciple calls on the soul's energy to target and essentially wake up one of those old dormant thought forms. Once it's activated, the thought form expands and precipitates. The book claims that if you have inner sight, you can actually see its distorted, sometimes even monstrous shape become visible. The original text even has these incredible color illustrations showing what this looks like. So now you've got this ugly thing active and visible. What do? You invoke another tool, the spiritual vortex. You visualize it as this powerful whirlpool of energy that comes down from above, trapping the thought form so it can't just escape and reform later. Then, that vortex gets to work. It powerfully shatters the thought form's structure, just breaks it apart, releasing all the psychic energy that's been locked inside it for who knows how long, maybe lifetimes. And the final move is described as a blast of pure soul energy that comes down and just completely dissolves whatever's left of that dark mass. And for that specific pattern, the purification is done, you've cleared one piece of the cage, and then you can move on to the next. Okay, so you build the bridge, you clear the cage, but why? What's the end goal? The book is crystal clear that this isn't just about personal development or feeling good. It's about serving a much bigger collective purpose. The idea here is really mind-blowing. Each individual rainbow bridge that gets built doesn't just exist by itself. It becomes part of a huge, growing energy network, a planetary Antahkarana that connects all of humanity to what the authors call the planetary hierarchy, which you can think of as a collective of enlightened spiritual guides. And this leads us to the ultimate purpose of all this work, to prepare the individual to join what's called the new group of world servers. This group is described as being this vital link between that spiritual hierarchy and the rest of us, and their job is to transmit these higher energies to help bring about what the book calls the new age. And this final quote just beautifully sums up the whole vision. The incredibly personal, internal work of building a bridge to your own soul is ultimately framed as a way to tap into a universal source of wisdom, that rain cloud of knowable things, and bring it down for the good of everyone. In this view, the most personal journey you can take becomes an act of global service. Which really leaves us with a pretty provocative thought, doesn't it? What happens when enough people finally build their bridges?